Ever stare at your Angular code feeling like you are trying to untangle a spaghetti monster? You are not alone. Angular is powerful, but it can sometimes feel, well, a bit much. What if I told you there are 10 super simple tricks that can make your Angular projects cleaner, faster, and genuinely easier to manage? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll have an arsenal of tips that will transform your coding experience from A to AHA. Let's dive in. So, why bother with these tips? Because whether you are just starting out or you've been dabbling in Angular for a while, these practices aren't just fancy to haves, they're foundational. They help you write code that's easier to read, quicker to run, and way less prone to bugs. Think of them as your secret cheat sheet to becoming a more efficient Angular developer. First up, standalone components. Why it's useful? Imagine building with Legos. Traditionally, you'd put a bunch of Legos into a module box before using them. Standalone components let you use that specific Lego piece directly, without needing the module box. This cuts down on extra files and makes your app's structure much clearer. Instead of this old way, you can now just do this directly in your component. In example, see that standalone, true. That tells Angular, hey, this component doesn't need a module to live in. It's self-sufficient. Less clutter, less headache. Next, the Async Pipe. This one is a lifesaver. Why it's useful? When you get data from the internet, like user profiles or product lists, you usually subscribe to it. But if you forget to unsubscribe when you leave that page, it can cause memory problems. The Async Pipe handles all of that for you automatically. No more forgotten unsubscriptions. Imagine you have user data $. The $sign often means it's an observable, like a stream of data. Old way requires manual unsubscribe in ngOnDestroy. New way with Async Pipe, no manual unsubscribe needed. The pipe async part in your HTML template is the Async Pipe. It listens to your user data $stream, displays the latest value, and when your component goes away, it automatically cleans up the subscription. Pure magic. Tip number 3. Using trackBy with ngFor. Why it's useful? When you have a list of items displayed on your screen, like a list of comments or products, and one item in that list changes, Angular often rebuilds the entire list from scratch. This can be slow, especially for long lists. trackBy tells Angular, hey, here's a unique ID for each item. If an item with this ID already exists, just update it instead of recreating it. It's like recycling. In the example, you have a list of products. Now, if you change the name of the mouse product, Angular knows that product ID 2 is still the same item. So it just updates its name rather than rebuilding the whole list tag. Much faster and smoother. Moving on to Lifecycle Hooks. Why it's useful? Components in Angular have a life. They're created, they live on the screen, and then they're destroyed. Lifecycle hooks are like special moments in that life where you can tell Angular to do something. For example, ngOnInit is perfect for loading initial data, and ngOnDestroy is where you clean things up. In example, ngOnInit runs after your component is set up but before it's shown on screen. ngOnDestroy runs just before your component is completely removed. Using these ensures you do things at the right time. Next, we have RxJS operators. Why it's useful? RxJS is how Angular handles streams of data over time. Remember our user data $ from earlier? Operators are like little tools you can use on these data streams to transform, filter, or combine them. Learning just a few basic ones, map, filter, switch map, makes handling data much cleaner and more powerful. Here in example, filter lets only even numbers through. Then map takes those even numbers and transforms them, multiplies by 10. Imagine doing this with an array. It's similar, but for streams of data that arrive over time. Switch map is super useful when you make one request, and based on its result, you need to make another. Tip number 6, don't forget the power of Angular CLI commands. Why it's useful? The Angular command line interface, CLI, is your best friend. It's a tool that helps you do common tasks quickly. Instead of manually creating files for a new component, you can type one command and the CLI does it all for you. It's a massive time saver. To create a new component, ngGenerate component name. To start your development server and see your app in the browser, ngServe. To create a new service, ngGenerate service name. Moving on to environment files. Why it's useful? Have you ever had different settings for your app when you are developing it versus when it's live for users? Like a different address for your backend server? Environment files let you store these settings securely and switch between them easily when you build your app for different purposes. No more changing code manually. In example, when you run ngServe for development, Angular uses environment.ts. When you build for deployment with ngBuild, configuration is equal to production, it automatically swaps in environment.prod.ts. Super handy for keeping your sensitive production settings separate. Let's talk about reactive forms. Why it's useful? When building forms, like login forms or contact forms, you need to handle user input, validate it, and submit it. Reactive forms give you full control over your form data directly in your TypeScript code. This makes validation much cleaner, easier to test, and generally more robust than the older template-driven forms, especially for complex forms. In example, you define your form controls, email, password, and their rules, validators.required, validators.email, directly in your TypeScript. Your HTML then simply binds to these controls. This separation of concerns makes your forms much more manageable. Almost there. Tip number 9, lazy loading modules. Why it's useful? Imagine a huge website with many sections, like a big online store. If your browser had to download all the code for every single page when you first visit, it would be super slow. Lazy loading means you only load the code for a specific section, a module, when the user actually navigates to it. This makes your initial page load much faster. In example, when a user goes to dashboard, Angular will then download and load dashboard.module. Until then, that code isn't part of the initial bundle, making your app start up much quicker. And finally, our 10th tip, change detection strategies, specifically OnPush. Why it's useful? Angular constantly checks if any data has changed so it can update what you see on the screen. By default, it's pretty thorough, sometimes too thorough, checking components even if their data hasn't actually changed. OnPush tells Angular, hey, only check this component if its direct input data has changed or if an event happened inside it. This makes your app much more efficient and faster. In example, with OnPush, Angular is smart. It won't re-render child component unless its user input actually changes or an event happens inside it. This avoids unnecessary checks and boosts performance, especially in large applications with many components. And there you have it. 10 simple, yet incredibly powerful Angular tips that can make a huge difference in your coding journey. From standalone components to lazy loading, these practices will lead to faster, cleaner, and much more maintainable Angular applications. Which one are you going to try first? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe for more Angular tips, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. Happy coding!